Shalom. It's great to speak to all of you in this Shabbat Torah talk, and I want to wish all of you health and safety during this time of the spike in the coronavirus. I hope we're all going to be able to return very soon to our normal activities, but in the meantime, we want to stay safe, protect our immune-compromised and elderly, and do everything we can, including the wearing of masks, to help protect one another. Sorry we couldn't have our Shabbat dinner and service outdoors under the stars, but we hope next month we'll be able to hold it socially distanced, and also people wearing masks on their way in and having it outdoors in a beautiful home of one of our members. So we'll look forward to that next month. The Torah portion this week is the portion of Matot, and it tells a really important lesson. It has a really important lesson for all of us to adhere to. It's the teaching of an oath, and it says, if a man makes a vow to the Lord or takes an oath, imposing an obligation on himself, he shall not break his pledge. He must carry out all that crossed his lips. That prohibition on swearing is actually one of the 10 Commandments, and there's an entire tractate of the Talmud, Nidarim, that speaks about the importance of vows and promises. And the difference between an oath and a vow refers to an object. A person prohibits something to themselves or vows to do something. And an oath is different. It refers to the person, to a person swearing an oath to perform an action or to make sure that something is true, to verify that something is true. The oath pertains to the person. And I think what's really important for us to recognize is that oaths and promises are taken very seriously in Jewish tradition. Our Orthodox brethren, when they make a statement about promising or committing to do something, they always say, Bili neder. Bili neder without a neder, without a vow. In other words, I don't mean it as a vow. I'm hoping to do that. So the idea is that you're very careful and cautious in what you commit to do. And vows and oaths are very precious in Jewish tradition. Keeping one's word is a great part of our integrity. We all know that. Used to be that the Jewish people were persecuted, and so they had to make a vow or an oath to renounce their Judaism during the Inquisition. We know this occurred in great numbers. Many Jews were left with no choice, death, exile, or convert to Catholicism. And so they took an oath, and they were asked to be released from this oath after they could return to the Jewish community after the Inquisition had passed. And so the idea of release of vows came into what we know as the most famous evening of Jewish tradition, Kol Nidre night, when we recite the Kol Nidre, all vows. We ask God to release us from vows that we made to our Maker, to our Creator, under duress. And you know, it's really very interesting, because that concept of making a vow or a promise in situations or circumstances like that led many anti-Semites to say, oh, you can't believe those Jewish people, because they go into their synagogues on the eve of Yom Kippur and they say, Kol Nidre, we want to be released from all vows. What they forget is those are only vows between ourselves and God, our Creator, not vows between person to person. Between person to person, you have to correct that wrong. You have to fulfill that promise or vow, or that person has to release you from it. Now, there have been many canards against the Jewish people, false accusations, false claims. One of them, I'm sure you've heard it, the Jews control all the media. The Jews control all the banks. That is so patently false. All Jews are rich. We know we have so many poverty-stricken Jewish people in Eastern Europe, in Israel, even here in the United States, who are living right on the margins. And to say that is such a violation. Recently, a African-American commentator, Nick Cannon, had a guest, this Professor Griff, on his podcast. And again, they repeated that canard. The Jews control all the media. The Jews control the music industry. It's so patently false. But what it does is that it creates endemic anti-Semitism. And this manifests in each generation. And we have to be committed to stand up to those lies and make sure they aren't repeated and source as the cause of so much hatred. Not too many years ago, I conflicted with Louis Farrakhan over the issue of slavery. He claimed that a large majority of the slave owners and slave traders were Jews. And the fact is, the historical record shows that less than 5% of slave traders were of the Jewish faith. 95% were not. Many of them were Christians. Many of them were actually black Muslims, because this idea of slave trading was something that was very prominent in Africa among warring tribes. So at the end of the day, we have to see this in perspective. We have to remember that what we say, what crosses our lips, is very important. It can be the source of unity and coming together, or it can be the source of divisiveness. And this is also true of the vows and the promises that we make to one another on a personal level. You know, when you make a promise to someone to do something, I'm sure your heart and intention is in the right place. But when you don't fulfill it, you create a negative energy around it. When you're unable to, and we know life happens and we get busy or something happens and we can't fulfill a promise to a friend. So what we have to do is recognize how important a promise is and make sure that we always keep our word, we honor our word, and we stand up to hatred. I hope this message inspires you from our Torah, and I wish all of you a Shabbat Shalom.